part of this, but as we begin to wrap up this session, I maybe address this big question that comes up. You mentioned earlier that our walk with God is linear. It has a beginning and has an ultimate aim.
Yes, yes.
I think that flies in the face of a lot of ideas where it's just cyclical, and I'm just going to keep falling down, and I keep struggling back and forth. So, what do you say to someone who feels like they're constantly struggling with sin despite having the Spirit working in them?
So Paul addresses this in Romans about, now that we have the grace of God, shall we continue in sin? And it's sort of a rhetorical question. Sure. He says, of course, may it never be. And so here's the problem with the wrong idea of often we hear the teaching of grace.
Okay.
Grace is called God's unmerited favor. In other words, God looks the other way while we remain unchanged and dark. And thank God that while we live the way we are, at least God's not holding against us, and that we're going to have eternity with heaven. That is completely a wrong definition of grace. Grace is not God looking the other way. It's God looking right at you. Mm-hmm. And the Bible says in Romans 8:26, in the same way, the Spirit also helps our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we should. But the Spirit himself, listen to this, intercedes for us in our sighings and our groanings with things too deep for words. So prayer in the Spirit is one of the greatest gifts and abilities of the Spirit in the life of the child of God. In other words, God is aware of your weakness. So when you talk about someone who's constantly struggling with sin, this is the very reason the Spirit was poured out in you. So here's what grace is. Grace isn't asking God to look the other way and you to stay here and be okay with being dark. It's God coming to say, grace is going to generate in you the power to be like him without it being mustered from your own human self.
Okay.
It takes the Spirit getting in you to come, not condemn your weakness or beat you up about it, but to help you.
To get in there with us
where
as
the weakness lives.
And working with that yes to God that you said, and no to unrighteous things that you mentioned earlier. The Spirit working in us to choose those things.
Yes, and so there have been times, especially in my early Christianity, especially the first year of my Christianity, I was so wanting to say yes, but the hooks of my old life were so deep that God was taking them out, delivering me of them. And the life-giving Spirit had severed me from them, but the attitudes and appetites that had loved that my whole life were being crucified. They were being put to death by the Spirit. And there were times where I struggled of the death and the crucifixion God is leading me to, that I just wept bitterly. I sighed, I groaned, I wept, because I was like,